An hour 15 maybe tops.
Sounds fine with me.
All right, cool. Hey, when you ready to go? Oh, he's gone. Goddamn.
I'm ready.
He just left for some reason. What's new with you, man? What have you been up to?
Just painting, working pretty much. Like
What just happened?
that challenge, and that consumed my life, and now I'm taking a break.
Yeah, how much do you want to talk about that kind of stuff? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I couldn't hear y'all, but apparently if I just add and subtract you, eventually I'll be able to hear you.
Can you hear everybody now, Penguin?
Now I can hear everybody, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't need to leave, apparently. I just needed to keep adding and subtracting you in whatever order they wanted me to.
Oh. Magnus, do you want to talk about your, like, a sort of an after action report on, like, your time protest?
What?
Oh, where did oh I did not mean to do that. I think I might.
What is going on?
Okay, sorry about that.
What are you doing?
Chaos.
I might have actually accidentally cut you off, Sec. My bad.
Yeah, I heard after action, and then you disappeared.
No, like
weird.
like what you learned from all your years protesting and activism and whatnot.
Yeah, so my passive jadedness, I guess.
Yeah. Welcome to the Jaded Old Man Club.
Yep. I mean, I turned 30 in like a month and a half, so I guess it's time to put up that badge.
Yeah. It's time to get knee-high socks and just yell at young kids to get off your lawn.
Pretty much already do that, so I'm there.
All right, you ready? Penguin, you ready to go or what?
Yeah. Let me 1 second. Oh, we're recording. Yeah, so let's do it.
All right. Magnus, mute while he does the intro, and then I'll introduce you, and then I'll throw it to you.
Word.
Hey, Magnus, can you mute? You got a little bit of background noise anyway. All right, welcome back to the Agora Podcast. It's me, Penguin, here with Sec Agora. It's your home for algorithm, localism, radical decentralization, and anti-authoritarian concepts. We have another exciting episode for you. Sec, if you don't have any announcements, go ahead and introduce our guest.
No. Well, I went and cleared some of our 6 acres today. That was fun. Spent about 5 hours, and we cut a driveway, cut an area for a campsite, cut an area for some dog kennels, and cut an area for like a the log splitter and like a wood processing area. So we got a shit ton done in I think we spent about 5 hours there. So we're gonna go up there again next Saturday, and then my buddy who's currently homeless is gonna stay up there on the property and kind of help take care of it. So we got one more day there, and then he can actually just move there, and then we're gonna put some chickens first, get some log splitting happening, and then rabbits and goats after that. So I'm pretty fucking stoked about it.
Yeah, you're living the life.
Yeah, trying to. Trying to get more meat sources, so I'm gonna just start making it myself.
Yeah, that's the most expensive and perishable usually thing. So I mean, and that's sometimes it's like the last thing you can acquire. I guess as far as food, nutrition stuff, other than maybe some specialty stuff. But generally, that's the last like major category of thing that you can acquire. You can have some, but like to be self sufficient in that's pretty good. That takes some work. That takes some investment for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna take some money, but no, I've got some meat sources now, like friends that either hunt or raise goats and sheep or cows or whatever. So I trade for that, but I want my own, so.
Yeah, it's a good place for specialization, but just as far as self-sufficiency goes, that takes a little more investment than throwing some seeds and fertilizing and whatnot.
Right. It's gonna take some cash, but I'm trying to do it in a way that it starts to pay for itself, like almost immediately. So like the land is woods now, right? So we're gonna cut down some trees, and I'm gonna get a log splitter, and I'm just gonna sell it as firewood, and then any decent logs I'll take to the mill. That's money, and then I'm gonna start with like 50 layer chickens. And so that's like 50 eggs a day. Take those to the farmer's market, sell them. So like I'm going to try to get it to pay for itself, so I don't have to put 20 grand into it, off the bat. But yeah, I'll keep everybody posted on that. I've been dropping some pictures here and there. So, all right. Well, today we are bringing back for I think the third time, we're bringing Magnus Panvidia. I'm going to let Magnus kind of introduce himself. I think our regular listeners are familiar with him, but he's an all-around. He's a painter, former activist, and a Twitter shit poster. Magnus, how you doing, man? Welcome back to Agora the podcast.
Hey, glad to be back, and apologize to anybody listening for the background noise. As a true anarchist, I have awful time management, so I'm currently racing back to the house. So I probably finish the second half of this from my computer instead of the car. But yeah, nice to see everybody again.
I tell you, the one thing I learned about doing podcasts with guests is like the hardest part about it is trying to get anarchists scheduled. You know what I mean? Because number one, it's like you said, they're bad at time management and things and remembering stuff. But also they're like, especially the people we bring on, they're always fucking doing something, So it's like, oh shit, I just spent the day doing this thing. I forgot about your show. Can we reschedule or whatever the thing? So it's always like scheduling is the hardest part. I need a fucking assistant or something.
Yeah, it's definitely my inability to understand time zones too. Because we went out on the lake. We were out on kayaks in the lake. And the wife is like, when's that podcast? I'm like, 5 p.m. Eastern. So, we don't have to leave until 5 o'clock because I thought it was the other way. She's like, no, that means you got to be home at 4. And that's right. I looked at my phone, and that's right when you messaged me. And I'm like, we need to get off this lake.
Shit. Time zones have fucked us like a number of times because I forget time zones exist. And then like other people, it screws up other people because they do the same thing you just did. Like they don't know what time Eastern is. So they need to do away with time zones or something because it screws me up all the time.
One of my real quick favorite time zone stories, when I lived in Chicago, I had a coworker that lived in Indiana, and it was daylight savings time. So when he left his house, not only did he jump time zone, but he also had to figure out how that worked with daylight savings time to make it to work. And he was late constantly because of that. And he never got in trouble for it either because the boss is like, I get it.
Yeah, that's a lot to try to like figure out, especially first thing in the morning when you haven't had your coffee yet, like wait, so do I have to leave an hour early or an hour later? I have no fucking idea.
Am I minusing 1 hour then plussing 1 hour, or am I minusing 2 hours?
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks when you're on a road trip. Like I just drove to Illinois, so we crossed a time zone there. On the way there, it was fine. Like we gained an hour, but on the way back, it was like we lost an hour. So it was like, what the fuck? Like it just took forever to get back. And then it was later than, I don't know, it was a pain in the ass. So I hate fucking time zones.
Yeah, I'm pro abolishment of time zones. Arizona did nothing wrong. Everyone should follow their lead.
Yeah, get rid of the daylight savings and the time zones and just keep it. Yeah, everybody's on the same time.
GMT.
That's how we do it. Yeah. So, well, why don't you tell our audience, in case they haven't heard other episodes with you or are unfamiliar with you, tell them a little bit about like yourself and your backstory and stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a weird I guess the official term for it is post-leftist, but I don't even know what to label myself. Strange form of anarchist. I've been around for quite a while. I've been involved in really old leftist hippie groups and anti-war groups back in like the Bush era. Then around lockdowns, I got involved with a bunch of like libertarian militias and stuff. And I started my own anti-war organization that kind of fell apart because of very interesting things, and now I'm a digital nomad who is totally avowed politics and refuses to engage in anything, and has become like the true Samuel Konkin, just uninvolved and uninterested in all of this nonsense.
So, you mentioned the Bush era. How old were you in the Bush era?
Oh, I was young. I was a little baby activist running around. I think I was 10 around then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I started as an environmental activist from like the moment I started going to school, because we had a student volunteer organization that was all about cleaning up our local river, and that was obviously run by like a bunch of hippie commies essentially, and that just like instant radicalism from a young age to like getting involved in Greenpeace, and then getting involved in like the anti-war stuff, and then obviously transitioning once I got more into like being a teenager and a young adult into like Obama era anti-war stuff, which is I know you personally have experienced what a shit show that was, especially if you came from Bush era to Obama era anti-war activism, and
Yeah, that was a real, honestly, that was a change in the way I thought about things. So my parents were like anti-war activists, super into Greenpeace, so that's how I was kind of raised. A lot of like animal liberation movement stuff, and a lot of the they did a lot of protesting with AIM, the American Indian Movement, and a lot of like native rights stuff. And so I got dragged around. Since I was a little toddler, like I was protesting like Reagan's wars as a.
Yep.
I mean, no, I wasn't. I was like 3, but I was getting dragged around to these things, right? And so when I became of age at like right around the Bush era, I was protesting George Bush like a good little radical, and I hated the fucking guy. I hated the Iraq War. I hated all the wars. And then, I felt really betrayed once Obama came around, and I expected a lot of the same people to remain consistent. and it turns out they weren't really like, this is an old trope, but I didn't realize this. They weren't anti-war. They were just anti-Bush, It kind of reminds me a lot of the old punk rockers in the 80s who were, writing songs against Reagan. And then like later on, it turns out they weren't like anti-government or anything. They were just anti-Reagan. You know what I mean? So I came into, I went through that from Bush to Obama, and that really changed. I became very jaded after that. Like I was like, oh, this is not for me anymore. But what do you think you've learned from your time protesting? I want to see if our perspectives kind of line up.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like for that exact same time period during like the Obama shift, that's pretty much what turned me into an anarchist, and what like made me have any kind of politics that could be tolerable to anyone who listened to this. Because I was like a straight up Stalinist, like big red tanky little red book carried around in my backpack, like straight communist. And the fallout after that, and just the drying up of energy, and people being hypocrites, and getting called racist by exclusively white people for protesting the same exact war that we were protesting together, and just all that silly shit, kind of like what really burnt me out of hardline leftism at all, any form of like democratic socialism, communism, whatever, because those are the people I was running with. And even I gained ideological differences with people like that later on, but in that moment it was just like, well, I don't want to be associated with these fucking people anymore. And that's kind of when I found people like in the Libertarian Party, like Ron Paul, and then I found things, obviously went from there into like Konkin and stuff like evolution, I still had, leftist tendencies as I do to this day, and I went back to like people on the more like anarcho-communist side, going all the way back to like Bruhan and stuff like that. And that slowly led me to my weird politics that I have today. But if it wasn't for realizing that kind of the major political institutions on any side, but particularly on the left, because I was involved with them, are just fake and they're performative and they don't really exist to serve any purpose, is kind of what ended up pushing me here.
So you became fairly famous. I don't know how long ago was that? A couple of years ago? 3 years ago?
2 years ago now. Yeah, I think it was January 2021, January 16th, 2021.
Okay. And you were putting together a lot of rallies, and you were going to a lot of protests, and you were involved in sort of community defense and what was known then as the Boog. And you've like walked away from like all of that. Can you tell people like why, what happened? What did you learn? I want to hear all the cynicism.
Yeah, there's a lot of cynicism. Like, there's obviously parts of it that you could apply to almost any like time period of activism. Like, lots of people turning out to be confidential informants. A lot of people turning out to be like, intentional shit stirs and ego politics and hierarchy climbing and people wanting to be the loudest voice in the room and people wanting to be represented and talking over each other. Because if anyone wasn't aware, my main thing, what made me different was unity politics. I was trying to get like communists and libertarians and anarchists and like Trump people to like work together on even very simple issues. And you can imagine how rapidly that aged me. Pretty much trying to do that for a year, but it was pretty successful for what it was and what we were working with. But it was just a massive pain. So you kind of had that. But the main thing that sort of distanced me from it was I've always been kind of like my main, I guess, e-persona is very much built around hating the culture war and this modern nonsense that's been going on. And obviously it's not really modern, because I know a lot of people aren't aware, but I was aware at a young age, and obviously you guys at your age know, but like there was the conservative side of this shit before all this, with banning Harry Potter and all that nonsense, and then it just evolved into wherever the hell it is now. And I desperately just kept trying to get people to move past that or even set it aside for a moment, and people just could not do it. And a big part of it for me that kind of burnt me out of all of it was my involvement with, no offense to you guys, it's a very different kind of caliber of people, but podcasters and streamers, both on the left and the right. I was heavily involved with Jimmy Dore and people that like ended up, going to work for RT and stuff like that on the left, and then all of the big podcasters that popped up around COVID lockdowns of libertarians and stuff like that. I was heavily involved with those groups. That was kind of my in to all of this. And I got a lot of peeks behind the curtain of how all of this works. And we could probably go into like more detail later, but I just found all of it very fake and disgusting. And I ended up feeling pretty used by all those people, because a lot of people on the left got their big break of getting hired at like more major organizations and stuff like that, and they just stopped talking to me completely. So I was just like a controversy bat for them to move up in the politics pundit world. And then people on the right, a lot of them were involved with the Mises caucus, and they pretended to be a lot more tolerant towards people of other views until they won control of the Libertarian Party. And then if anyone who's been on Twitter knows that a lot of true colors were shown, and I was just ended up used as like here's the queer lefty kids we're friends with, don't criticize us, until they got in power. And then I kind of, that all fell apart too. So the stuff everyone would know who's ever been involved in activism, the constant culture war shit, and then looking behind how like the Tim Pools and the Jimmy Dores and everything actually operate politically and who they are as people behind doors, definitely just made me give up on politics entirely, to the point where I think it is a completely hopeless endeavor.
I think I got 3 things that I kind of want you to respond to.
Okay.
So I think what sets us apart, me and Penguin here doing this podcast, is one, we don't necessarily care how big our audience. We would rather have a smaller core group of people who actually do shit rather than having 100,000 views. So we don't necessarily have the need to chase clout, as they say.
Yeah. The clout chase is the big part of it, for sure.
Yes, for sure. I don't care. I'll take one of our audience over 100,000 of Tim Pool's audience. Do you know what I'm saying? So, because I know our audience. It's all people that are out there really fucking doing shit and are kind people and decent humans. You know, like I'll take every one of those over, thousands of Tim Pool's or whoever's audience. And 2, we both are business owners, so we have a revenue stream already. This doesn't need to make money. You know what I mean? So I find that when podcasting or activism is your job, like that is your sole source of income, I think that it leads you down. There's incentives in place for you to, I don't know, latch on to the outrage of the day just so you can get the clicks and the likes, so you get a revenue stream, because you have to, because it's your living. I don't even blame these people. It's just like, that's how you're making a living. You have to do that.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have to do that. So
how many things that we just not talked about that I'm sure every other podcast, but I mean, that's our formula, you know? I mean, I wouldn't know how to make a podcast that to rival one of these guys, you know, in the first place on purpose. It's kind of like audience demand, but you know, I'm not out there trying to chase the clout and trying to do that, because
obviously the word I'm about to use has a lot of different definitions of different people, so I'll define it. But I call these people reactionaries, and I don't mean that in like the communist way that word means. I mean it like very literal, where their entire life is just turn on Twitter, turn on the news, see what's going on, react to it. That's Tim Pool, that's Dave Smith, that's Jimmy Doris, all of these people. They don't really create the news. They don't really create the events. They just react and argue about what's happening. And that's like, I feel like culturally the entire United States has become that. And it's really bad. And it's led to some pretty dark places, in my opinion, which is a whole other thing. But it's also like something I can't really tolerate, because then you try to get these people to do something, and if it's not already a thing, well, then they can't react to it, so they don't know how to deal with it, so they don't get involved. And the fact that you're even talking to me proves that it's not, you know, you're not just chasing whatever the headline is of the day.
Yeah, they're not really doing, in the sense that they're not coming up with a plan and implementing it, or doing something with true purpose. I mean, they're really essentially clout chasing, but they're essentially kind of forming their actions based on kind of, you know, what's in the news, what's the topic, what gets clicks. And again, you can just see all of these media outfits just reading the headline and kind of posting their take as if that's, I mean, apparently there is an audience for that because people are getting paid for that, but you know, that's not us. And I think that's probably, if however successful we are at that, I think that's always going to be the way we're successful in that. And I very much use the word reactionary the way you do. I think, I mean, in that sense of the word, and not in like the, you know, it's basically a Marxist sense. Like, you're reacting to our revolution. No, a reactionary is basically someone who is reacting essentially to the other side, to the supposed other side or enemy, or the
right. They're almost like they're like a Newtonian object. They do not move until force is put upon them. They're never making the first step in anything.
And then it becomes a kind of circular thing too, because it's just reactionaries reacting to reactionaries, and so forth and so on. There's really no new ideas. It's basically just rehashing old ideas.
You just summed up like one of the main reasons I quit politics right there. Just a sentence: reactionaries reacting to reactionaries.
I think that's most of fucking social media at this point too.
I was just thinking about that on Twitter. I don't know if just to speak of something just like current events. And this people did really actually kind of see just how stupid and hollow and just brain dead this was, but like this latest, and this won't even matter if you're listening to this like a week from now. It doesn't even matter now anymore. But like this outrage of the 48 hours or even the 24-hour social media cycle of this lady getting in a fight with these black kids over a city bike, whatever that even is, in New York City. And to people's credit, I mean, the reason I even bring this up is because a lot of people said this is like the stupidest thing in the world. This is a pointless non-story. Nothing happened. It certainly didn't happen the way, you're trying to basically clout chase and get impressions. You're literally trying to either get a dopamine hit by tweeting this out to whatever small audience you have, or really trying to get impressions because you have some sort of essentially grift in the social media kind of podcasty, whatever bloggy scene. And it just shows how kind of hollow that is. It's just like, politics gets more and more centralized and more focused around this kind of, center elite mainstream politics, but the base politics, I was just thinking this last night, the base politics gets so crude and so dumbed down because there's nowhere for any kind of intellectualism to go. It's like the powers to be, the forces, the mainstream, the government, the institutions are all consolidating into a center, and everyone else has some sort of intellectual proclivity. There's no outlet for that. So instead you just get the most base, crude, vulgar, whatever the word you want, stupidity on social media that becomes the story of the day instead of something kind of, something a little more meaningful. I hope we try to bring and most of our friends.
Yeah, and it's definitely just like a difference between it almost boils down to like a consumer versus a creator, to where I could think of off the top of my head, two very conservative people who have like polar opposite politics of me on like almost everything, but like they took actions that I found respect. And one of them, I forget his name, but he went on Tim Pool, and he was essentially like this, just upper class white dude from Baltimore, I think it was. Very conservative, had typical politics that you expect of that guy. But instead of just like complaining about like, oh, Baltimore is so dirty and blah, 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 and like, our cities have fallen, he created an organization that's like a volunteer organization where they went around and like cleaned up their neighborhoods. And I'm like, there you go. Like, you probably hate me and I hate you, but I can find respect that like you're not just a consumer of politics, you're creating politics. And that's rare nowadays. Yeah, that's just so rare nowadays for like anyone to be like actively doing something and creating something instead of just like consuming whatever's going on.
Yeah, I mean, and I was talking about this too recently, on Twitter. I was commenting on the same thing, like, coming at societal issues, coming at ideas and action in good faith, and not just being like we said, that kind of reactionary voice, that kind of, impression chasing. And that's probably even a better word in the social media context, just as good of a word as clout chasing, impression chasing kind of, commenter or just some kind of, reply guy. But coming at ideas in good faith and actually wanting something good, or to call out something that's truly bad, or actually have an original idea, I'll give you my ear. I won't just say that this person's garbage, just because I might disagree with their prescriptions, or I just might disagree with the kind of their framework about how things work. Yeah, a lot of people are wrong in the world. Most people, I think that most people are wrong in the world about a lot of things. I think that's pretty common among our audience. But just coming at things in good faith, and I think there's all sorts of people that certainly do that. And that's an idea. There's parts of it that probably are rooted in a genuine feeling of like wanting human flourishing, or wanting people to be safe and secure in their lives, even though you might see that in a totally different way than I do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and then you said you had 3 things. That was one of them.
Yeah, we got through one. So actually these last 2 are sort of related. Hold on one second. Hold on.
Well.
Okay, sorry about that.
He dropped his note card. He dropped his 3x5 note card.
Yeah. I have notes. I also wear glasses. So this kind of is related to what we're talking about, and these two different situations I'm going to bring up are I think might be related. So Penguin and I talked one other time, and like I said, I was out protesting during Bush to the lead up to the Iraq War, and I was in Washington D.C. and there was hundreds of thousands. So I've heard somebody say there was 1 million people in Washington D.C. at the protest. I don't know if that's true, but there was at least hundreds of thousands of people there, and probably as much as many people that came out during Vietnam. And the Iraq War still happened. And a lot of people, especially in the anti-war, they take the Vietnam War protest as a success, like, oh, we stopped the Vietnam War. And I don't know if that's true, because I think there was other factors there. I don't think it was the protesting, and maybe because I'm just jaded about protesting, but like I said, we had fucking hundreds of thousands of people in Washington D.C. to protest the Iraq War, and it still happened. And there was not a lot of popularity for that particular war, and I don't understand what actually stops war, and I don't know if it's protesting. I think it's a lot of other. I don't think protesting actually does much at all, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you look historically, usually it's coups stop wars. But.
Yeah, or sabotage. A lot of sabotage, and when I think a lot of it is when soldiers start shooting their officers. That usually that happened a lot during the Vietnam War. It's not talked about much, but I think that's a lot to do with why the war stopped. That and a lot of heroin addiction. They were concerned about all the heroin coming back from Vietnam. So this leads me to my so I don't think protests actually stop war. I don't think they really solve much of anything. And then this leads me to sort of Occupy. Now, during Occupy, I was very jaded at that point in terms of like civil disobedience or like political activism or protesting or anything like that. I didn't think it had any. We didn't stop the Iraq War, so I was very cynical about protesting. And so you had Occupy, and I was slightly interested. I went to a few of the Occupy movement protests and just to kind of see what was going on. And a lot of people have made the argument that this culture war stuff was actually an op. That you were talking about like unity politics earlier, and you had a lot of unity politics during Occupy, and I was really happy to see it. And then it sort of fizzled because people started squabbling about cultural stuff. Because you had a lot of different people who were at Occupy in the beginning. You had like communists and social democrats, and you had like libertarian types, and you had all kinds of people there.
Yeah, you have that famous video of Peter Schiff sitting down with a bunch of communists and talking about how much they hate banks.
Yes, I mean, that's what you said. Can we at least get around? Do we all hate banks? Can we rally around this? Like everybody fucking hates banks. Can we at least get together around this? And so I don't know how much this is true, but it seems to make sense that the culture war stuff was an op, because you actually had sort of unity coalition politics for a while, and you might have had it again recently with your movement, but then again it breaks down. Everybody starts yelling about this or that thing and their own cultural hang-ups and whatever the thing, and that seems to always come to the forefront during times when people are like actually getting together and trying to put their differences aside and protest whatever thing's going on that we can all kind of agree on. And how much do you think this is actually an intentional op? And how much do you think that's just sort of human dynamics?
I definitely think that like it's not 100% organic, but I also don't think it was like a grand, like Tim Pool believes it is like a legit grand conspiracy. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between that, because I mean, like, as soon as social media came around, the stuff started getting worse. And anybody can tell you that it's really easy to get people to act this way on social media, like with no pushing or pressure at all. But it's also really easy to make it like,
hold on, you're breaking up. We lost you.
to go onto Reddit and concern troll about how
Right.
Bernie Sanders could never win, to try to like get voting for him, and they go on 4chan and be like, "Oh, Trump's never going to win," whatever. And they were, paid tax dollar paid political operatives, So it's definitely biddable. I don't think that the entire thing's a grand conspiracy. In most things, I don't. I'm not that kind of anarchist. But there is always that famous quote. I forget if it's Hillary Clinton or somebody said it, where it's like, "You never let a good disaster go to waste." That's kind of what I feel like. They saw social media causing division and problems, and kind of just benefit off of human nature and push it a little bit more and make it even worse. And they've kept pushing it so much to where now it's like insalvageable.
Yeah, no, I think it is. You're definitely right. I definitely reject the grand conspiracy narratives. I'll say this. So yeah, it's totally a dynamic from social media, and it's totally a dynamic of it's genuine. It's not like it's something that's being necessarily. It's not being pushed surreptitiously or anything like that. I mean, I think there's a lot of that. I mean, I think you go on these anonymous websites, and there's a lot of what we see now does come from paid trolls, and that used to be a common thing that people said before it got so tarnished. I mean, really, if anything, the whole Russiagate thing, which being overblown and ludicrously overblown as it was, like, it really kind of actually made it so it made it partisan, and it made it so we couldn't have a serious discussion. Like a lot of movements and people are products, or a lot of ideas are come about as influence campaigns, and especially did in that kind of early 20 teens era. But like when it comes to Occupy, I think I do agree with Sec. If anything, I think it's right. We don't agree with grand conspiracies, but I think Occupy was a wake up call. Occupy was at the very least a wake up call that let's amplify this kind of politics, like over time, and just generally, just let's amplify, let's fund, let's create initiatives, let's get these people in the institutions, let's get these people in leadership positions, let's get this stuff front and center in the media, and let's get the like we said, the reactionaries, let's get the other side front and center as well as the opposition, and maybe let's switch it up back and forth. You're going to have a Republican president sometime, you're going to have this, you're going to have that, but what's going on here? You're going to have that. Oh, they're shoot.
Did he drop?
No, I just got home.
Welcome back.
So I probably sound a lot better now.
You sounded better for a second before too. Anyways, but I think it was absolutely a wake up call that let's actually go this route. Let's make this both the politics and the entertainment of the day. Social media is going to facilitate that. Social media is blowing up. It's going to be a thing. It's going to be a one of the dominant things that people do with their time, and the way that people consume and do have an exchange, back and forth exchange of information. It's like this Web 2.0 thing.
It's strong enough to where you have marketing agencies are starting to capitalize on this. We're like intentionally releasing rage bait to get more eyeballs on their product, completely separate.
Oh yes. No, I think it's natural, but I do think that like there was a broad push across. I think there's I use this term a lot, a decentralized conspiracy after stuff like Occupy. It's a wake-up call, I think, to the ruling class or elite class or whatever, that yes, this is the way to go, because the last thing you want is a lack of division, which division is always division, but like a lack of division and populism. You don't want you don't want a populism to merge. You definitely don't want a populism to emerge that's not a divisive populism a la Trump or something,
Mm-hmm.
So, how much stock do you put into protesting now? Do you
I
find
think
it valuable?
like something I kind of learned, and I kind of always knew this, but it solidified the more I thought about it. That protesting is more for networking and getting people together face to face in these movements than anything else. It's literally touching grass. It could be, barely. You'd barely notice a difference if it happened in like a hotel boardroom than it did on the streets protesting, because I do think there's a lot of positivity to where, if I think back to my anti-war march that I did in DC, that got like a bunch of pretty important people together that had never spoken before and probably never would speak, because the internet is very just dehumanizing, and if anything they'd be screaming at each other in Twitter replies. But you get them down face to face, and after the event's over, like during the event, it kind of doesn't matter. But after the event, when everybody goes to like a bar or something like that, and they sit down, these conversations start happening. That's when you start seeing like things build out. And even though I kind of don't want to be associated with it at all, because it kind of turned into a big, ugly clusterfuck for a lot of reasons. But the Stop the War Machine thing, that would have never happened if it wasn't for my End the Damn Wars march, because a whole bunch of people that put that together would have never met and never would have talked at all if they wouldn't have shown up to the same event. And then they went on to have a huge, protest in DC that was kind of a mess for a bunch of reasons we probably don't even want to go into. But like, yeah, either way. So that's what I think is important for protesting. And obviously being on the street, you can catch like the random people that don't follow your social media, don't know what's going on, and walk up and just be like, oh, actually, I want to be involved with this. And you can kind of grow membership from that. But in terms of like affecting the government at all or doing anything towards the problem, like directly, no, it's completely useless.
So let me okay. I mean I agree with what you say, and that's kind of why I was going to Occupy it all. I didn't think it was actually going to do anything, but I just kind of wanted to go meet people who thought like I did. But here's the thing, so you can achieve that same result while also doing something productive or constructive. So like I'll give you an example. Like I go to a lot of like local anarchist meetups and swap meets, and we are go do a lot of outreach to the homeless. You end up meeting people that way.
Yep.
We go, you can go touch grass and actually do something, I think, like in terms of like direct action, which is, I think, more productive, and also network in the same way. Now, you don't have people like flying across the country for for that sort of thing, but you're still, getting out there, touching grass, doing something constructive, and also networking, like you said, without, the cops showing up and tear gassing people and spending your afternoon in DC. You wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I think you can go touch grass and network without the protest. I don't know. I'm really jaded on protesting. I'm not gonna lie.
Like at this point, I 100% agree. Like that's why I said like you could probably accomplish almost the same amount, minus like the rare but occasional like person who walks up to you on the street not knowing what's going on. That's the only benefit, and that's not as common as you would hope it would be. Usually, people just are so checked into their phones and have their headphones in or whatever that they don't even know you're there. So yeah, you could accomplish just as much in renting a hotel lobby and having a meeting as you could most, like 90% of protests for sure.
Yeah,
but you're not
or doing like mutual aid or doing like some community outreach or like,
food not bomb style or something. Like feeding the homeless, and they're like, oh, what's food not the bombs? And then you get to a conversation with a stranger and whatever, but
yeah,
you're not sitting at home on a computer.
Involved with a couple groups in Detroit and never even got to meet them was because one of my people, one of my friends, after the floods that hit Detroit, just went out and was just picking up garbage and shit, and then people would like walk up to him and be like, "Thanks for doing that," and then he would talk to them, and then they'd be like, "Oh, are you with anybody?" And that all led to that, and that's a way more productive time than standing on a street corner and screaming, So.
Right, you're killing a bunch of birds with one stone. You know what I mean? Like you're picking up trash in the neighborhood. You're also networking, and you're also like changing people's minds who are just walking down the street. So there's so much. I just think there's so much energy wasted in protesting that could be put into other things. Now,
Absolutely.
you might say it raises awareness or what have you, or if you were making news with your march. So, you might say there's that, it raises you get some eyeballs, I guess, like sort of nationwide, maybe. But you know what? You know who else did? But this dude's Food Not Bombs gets, news. It gets in the news now and again. But that dude that's been arrested, like that pastor in Florida that's been arrested like 30 times for feeding the homeless, he made the fucking news too. Well, for doing what he believed in, just going and doing it, So I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is, but I think direct action is our best course of action going forward.
Yeah, and that's definitely like part of another reason I kind of got over it is realizing like the broad left is only interested in direct action when there's a Republican president. We obviously know this. The diehards, I love them to death. I'll never say anything bad. Like the people that are down in protesting Cop City, chaining themselves to trees and getting shot by fucking cops and shit like that under Biden. Like, yeah, those are the real people. And shout out to them. But they are a very, very small minority, And when it comes to the right in general, and particularly libertarians, I to this day believe that like Konkin is like rolling in his grave. Do the allergy libertarians have to doing anything that has any risks to them whatsoever? Because like obviously like nobody's going to do some Athens, Tennessee stuff and possibly die or go to prison for the rest of their life. I understand that, and I don't even advocate doing stuff like that. That's a whole another extreme. But you want to talk about just simple stuff that can get you a ticket, something that will sit in jail and then be let go and not even be charged with anything like that. Libertarians are terrified of that. And I even remember pretty vividly being on Dave Smith's show for the first time and kind of advocating like some illegalism, some civil disobedience, and him being like, well, I don't want to recommend anybody to break the law. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, So that was definitely realizing that more and more of like because it was during COVID lockdowns, and I was trying to get people like big libertarian musicians. I'm like, put on a music festival on private property, and if the cops show up, tell them to fuck off, and just like do some nonviolent civil disobedience. Terrified of it, wouldn't do it. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to get out. And even like the Republicans that were doing like anti-mandate protests and stuff like that, they'd stay in their car. They'd like still follow as much guidelines as possible. And if the cops came and like, okay, you need to go, they would argue a little bit and then leave. There was no, stuff that we would be familiar with in like animal liberation and like green movement. There was no that form of radicalism, and it just simply doesn't exist in those circles at all. And I think it partially is like the podcaster bro mentality and like the orbiting these big fucking political figures, and all of these people don't do anything. And I feel like they
have a reputation and a revenue stream, Magnus. Yep. That's what it is. They can't do anything that would risk their reputation and revenue stream.
Because I even mentioned, and I'm like, if you had an anti-lockdown protest and Dave Smith said that he would be there, there'd be people that would never show up to a protest that would show up just to talk to Dave Smith. Like they have that power. The Hassan Piker could show up to like a union strike and a million fucking people would appear out of the woodwork just to see Hassan. They wouldn't even care about the thing, but it would make the numbers bigger for that event. But they don't do that. And the fact that they won't do that makes me feel like they're either purposely or by happenstance exist exclusively to just suck the political air out of the room. Like, you don't have to do anything. Just tune into Timcast tonight and listen to whatever Tucker Carlson has to say or whatever Kyle Kalinske has to say, and then get mad and yell on Twitter and don't do anything. That's kind of politics now. And if you do something, go stand on a street corner with a sign and get into an argument with a homeless person and accomplish nothing. Like, that's the other side of it.
Yeah, well, so much of what we do is online, It's so easy just to sit on your phone or sit on the computer, which is why I think the networking idea is a good idea. It's like, okay, now maybe this kind of action or these kind of protests or meetups or whatever serve a different purpose, because so much of what we do day to day, we can interact with people all the time, but we can do it on our computer, and it's just not the same. There's no equivalency to that online interaction and actual face to face. I think it's underrated. We're not going to really form those meaningful connections with people that could be anyone. I'm not even saying could be a Fed, could be just anyone. I mean, who do you know? It's just some avatar, you know. So I think you know, and obviously if you're someone who's doing video content and hey, going out there doing actions, doing stuff in public and filming it, that's a lot better than just being some kind of avatar, you know.
Yeah, that's
I think maybe this stuff forms a different purpose in the internet age, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of like what to me was really sad, was like watching like the Luke Rakowskis and like that whole circle transition from kind of guerrilla reporters that would go and create news by like looking for things and finding things that other people aren't talking about, to sitting in a room with a microphone talking about whatever MSNBC wrote that day or whatever stupid take was on Twitter. And that was like the death knell of US politics for me right there, because that whole core of like that generation, that early Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, Luke Rakowski, Tim Pool before he started working at that. You had what's her name from RT? I'm forgetting her name.
Abby Martin.
Yeah, Abby Martin. Like that whole Abby, thankfully, she's still out kind of doing that. But that whole like generation of people, 90% of them just became podcaster bros and just stopped doing anything that ever made them interesting. And it's like, damn, that's sad to think about.
So here's my conspiracy theory, right? And I know Robbie Martin it has been, I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he's a good follow. He's on
fun.
point on this. He's a fun follow. He just calls everyone a fucking shill, and it's awesome. But here's the thing, Magnus. Like, okay, so propaganda used to be on the networks, and everyone used to watch the big fucking 3 networks or 4 or whatever the thing is. You had fucking 6 channels, and then you had cable. That's where propaganda was. Right now, no one watches fucking the mainstream networks at all. There's like 30 million people watching those shows out of like however many people are in the United States and worldwide.
Yeah, the famous thing where Tim Pool his show where it was just a bunch of empty chairs got more concurrent viewership than CNN and MSNBC put together.
Yes, exactly. So if the propaganda machine exists, where must it exist, Magnus? It can't be. It has to be where there's eyeballs. Otherwise, propaganda doesn't work, right? So it can't be just on the main networks. It must, and I'm not calling anybody anything, but I'm just saying it must necessarily be in alternative media and podcasts and YouTube stars and whatever else. That's where the propaganda has to be. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective. So I'm not saying any of these people are government agents, but I'm saying that some of them have to be. And so it might not be like, rah, George Bush, let's go fucking kill Muslims in the Iraq war, like Fox News during George Bush. But it must be like, yeah, I'm pretty anti-war, but that fucking China, right? That China, we got to go hit the fucking China. Right. I'm a freedom loving anti-war guy. I'm a libertarian, but man, that authoritarian Chinese government, we really have to. I mean, never mind that our own government surveils us and it just jails like fucking hundreds of thousands of people. But the Chinese, goddamn, those people over the Huns over the hill, we got to worry about them, right?
Yeah.
So like that is the propaganda. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's another element to that, though. I think there's multiple ways, and I can't probably think of all of them. But here's another big one. I think making people that have a good point. There's a good criticism of there, like 9/11 Truth. The first example I'm thinking of, and is an old example, but there's also more current ones to this age. But like the more whacked out kind of conspiracies, kind of discrediting any inquiry into like what really happened, the real actual suspicious stuff that occurred around the hijackers and all of this stuff. Like there's actual not non-schizoid, conspiracy theories around a whole lot of things, and I think even amplifying just more easily discredited or just crazy sounding people or critics of the regime. I think that can also serve among many other things. It's that same kind of propaganda, but yeah, Robbie's all about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I y'all can be careful, but I can be just flagrant accusatory because I'm totally out of this space. But like my experience with Tim Pool was a wild wake up to a lot of this shit. To where so people I know of like people I was friends with started working for him and were like officially employed by him, and then other people I know had like he had essentially had all of my current friends at that point, or people I associated with in those movements, on his show at one point. So I was like, people kept going, like people kept adding me, like, go on Timcast, go on Timcast. I'm like, I will if I'm invited. I'm perfectly fine. I can talk about my anti-war march. I can talk about my unity politics. I can explain the shit going around with the movement I used to be associated with. I can give all these answers, but Tim wouldn't have me on. So I was like, oh, okay. They never reached out. I'm like, whatever. I'll just move on with my life. And then, a big thread came out essentially of like a bunch of people trying to get me on Tim Pool when I was literally the subject of discussion. And they like pointed Lydia towards me. And Lydia was like, yeah, we know we're not interested, essentially. And that's when I learned from people working for him that they did not want somebody involved with a domestic terrorist organization, was a verbatim thing, on their show because they could get taken off of YouTube and demonetized for doing so. Never mind that like I was on Jimmy Dore and like a bunch of other, and Alex Jones and a bunch of other people that never got any, hit strikes or whatever from that. So I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then just a little while after that, they had fucking what the hell is his name? The leader of the Proud Boys, fucking
holy shit,
Enrique Tarrio. They
I
had
knew you were
Enrique
gonna say that,
on.
but
yeah, they had Enrique Tarrio on, which is way more of like a brand risk than whatever to have on there. So it was like, what's going on here? That's kind of suspicious, don't you think?
Turns out that guy's a Fed. Oh, that's interesting.
Wild. Yeah, so that's what like I'm like, oh, that was one of my big moments where I'm like, oh, this is all fake. This is all just bullshit. Like even the people that hold politics that I disagree with don't genuinely hold those politics. It's bullshit. It's shock jockeying. It's interaction chasing. It's farming culture war. And in my opinion, he didn't want to talk about me because my whole thing is anti-culture war, and I have positions and takes on things that are very anti-culture war. And his show has devolved more and more into just a culture war show. And that was kind of my opinion on this, of like, oh, well, it had nothing to do with the organization or me being considered a domestic terrorist if you have a guy on your show that was literally arrested and, given domestic terror charges for burning that BLM flag in DC, whatever. And then his boys ended up going on and participating in January 6th, which is a whole nother fucking thing. You're okay with that. You're not okay with me because of like what I believe. And it's because like what I believe is very counter to what
you don't fit his narrative.
Yeah, his whole thing he's trying to build, and their whole thing they're pushing. And that was one of the big things where I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. And I had very similar experiences with that with like almost everybody, to where, like I had similar experiences with Alex Jones and like people on the right. I had similar experiences with people on the left. And that's when I realized like none of these people are genuine. They're all just trying to dance around algorithms and dance around community guidelines and push a certain thing. And it's not even to the degree where it's kind of understandable. Like everyone has a bias, everyone has an agenda. But anyone who says they don't, they're lying. They have a world they want to create, but they're lying about that to an extent that it becomes silly and it becomes fake. And that's kind of where I just got over all of it.
So
yeah, but I do think
across
that
Alex
making a living doing
Jones.
this.
What?
Go ahead. I was going to say, I do agree that making a living doing that kind of changes your perspective, and you have a different mission statement. Like, I would like to be successful and have a bigger audience. I wouldn't mind making money doing it. I don't know what we do with the money. Probably just some really interesting stuff. But like, I would love to have a bigger audience, by all means. But like, I'm sure that comes with some some changes. I'm sure that if I was to do that if we were to grow so much that this became my job, which I mean, it never will. That's crazy. But let's say it does. I mean, that just changes your mission statement, your entire outlook. What you're doing is entirely different, and what you're deciding to talk about isn't. It's constraining. It's not freeing. It's not having money, having an audience. It's not freeing. That's absolutely constraining you to audience demand. And honestly, we have the audience we have because they like to hear us talk. We don't ever listen to our audience besides a Q&A session and try to fit kind of their agenda or their preconceived notions or like what the masses want to hear. I think our audience is far better than the so-called masses, which I mean, that's what you call it when you appeal to the the masses, kind of like an Emma Goldman thing. The one thing I do know from Emma Goldman that I really do admire is what she said about the masses and democracy. But kind of what you get is the lowest common denominator, and that'll never be us, right?
Yeah, and
any of us here.
Like it's funny because I can think of like 6 examples for every broad, well, actually it would be 8 examples for every broad political group ever since I left of these people being shown to be totally fake. Like you want to start with libertarianism. You have a lot of people that just turned into like straight up neo-Confederates and obviously like Pete Quinones and all that crowd. And despite being trads, getting caught cheating on their wives and shit like that. You want to go obviously, if you want to keep talking about libertarians, you have the whole Ezra Blue fucking saga of her just being a complete fake person, that entire identity being manufactured. You want to go to conservatives, you have the whole Naomi Park thing going on. You want to go to like communists and stuff like that, you have socialist done left. He's kind of popular on the timeline right now because of his idiotic takes. His discourse got leaked, and despite being a progressive communist that's fighting for the people, his private Discord looks like a 4chan thread essentially, or an Alex Jones message board when talking about the Jews and shit like that. It's like all these people, when you dig into them, you learn they're just fake. Like their politics are fake, their identity is fake. They're doing all of this to push a certain agenda or be popular, and they'll do really anything to get that. And there's just every day, more and more examples come out. Somebody who was like my biggest hater among on anarchy Twitter, for kind of like leftist anarchy Twitter, turned out to be like a serial like woman beater, and that came out. It's like all these big media personalities, their dirty laundry gets aired, and then their orbiters, Steven Crowder with his wife, there's another good example, and their orbiters would be like, oh well, everyone's like this behind closed doors. It's like not me. People have been digging into my
and
wife.
Not the people I fucking know.
People have been digging into every single post and interaction and place I've been. I've been doxxed 3 separate times. My address, my car, everyone I associate with. People that knew me in high school have been hit up by people on Twitter digging for dirt for me, and nobody's found anything on me. So like what? So and these people will be like, oh well, everybody says racist jokes or beats their wives or lies about their background or exaggerates their personality, and it's like I think y'all are on the internet too much. I think that's not true at all.
Yeah, that's true for internet personalities, right? But that's not true for like everyone the fuck else. You know what I mean?
Normal human beings.
Right. So when you first came on, dude, you were talking about unity politics, and I don't remember who said it, but I'm like, you're gonna get Fred Hampton.
Jimmy Dore said that of all people.
Did he? Oh, okay. Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe I heard that on Jimmy Dore, but I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, so, I think we talked about Fred Hampton though.
Yeah.
And so you kind of did. So do you think that is like the source of the vitriolic hatred of you that I see? I'm like, I talked to Magnus. He's the nicest fellow. Like, I don't understand where all this fucking hate is coming. Like, I don't understand it at all. Like, he's a fucking Nazi and he's this and he's fucking this. And I'm like, what?
And then you get it from like a lot of libertarian sides. Like, he's a commie, he's a child groomer, he's a pedo, he's a communist, he's a leftist infiltrator, and all this other shit. Shuan had tweeted something like yesterday, and I really vibed with it, where she's like, I'm uncancelable because I have 3 separate fan bases and all of them hate each other and me. And I'm like, I kind of understand that a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I love her. Shuan had come on the Agora Podcast.
I actually was on a show with her. That was a surreal experience for my fucking life. But yeah, But yeah, it's definitely my entire life kind of got fucking ruined. Like I lost my house. I couldn't find a job. I ended up having to get a really shitty job that paid a lot, but required me to work like 70 hours almost a week. And that was all awful. And it's only really recently that I guess I've become unrelevant, not relevant enough to kind of fall out of the limelight. And even though drama about me picks up every once in a while, usually off of like me making an offhanded drunk meme and posting it to Twitter or something, but like my life's kind of stabilized. But for a while, yeah, I had Homeland Security show up to my house. I had the FBI show up to my house. I had my mom was doxxed. I had, people came up to me at punk shows that I was going to and being like, "Are you Magnus?" And I'm like, I have to lie because I don't want to get, fucked with in public. And it was all pretty crazy and for pretty simple message that I had. And thankfully things have calmed down, but it's really, if it wasn't for like, obviously like meeting my wife and like meeting people like you guys that like gone beyond like politics, like, oh, I consider you guys my friends, I would not consider any of it worth it from considering what I went through.
So do you think it's the unity message? Like, is it like, did you get Fred Hampton, or do you think it's the boog? Like the association with the boog?
I think it was the unity message, just for the fact that like it wouldn't have mattered where I came out of or who I associated with, because you see, it doesn't matter like the background of the person. It's associating with any of the other teams. It's just unacceptable, period. Doesn't matter.
Yes.
So obviously, like, that was the ammunition, was my association with like a libertarian militia that had a bunch of rightoids in it, that I ended up leaving. But people still bring that up to this day, even though I've been publicly disassociated and critical of it for almost a year. But if it wasn't of that, it would have found some other ammunition. It would have got more and more base and primitive to like the end of the day. Like it's kind of obscure, but it kind of meets the point of you have a guy on YouTube. He's a streamer. His name is Finster, and he's a cross-dresser. And he's like very non-political. He doesn't really ruffle any feathers. He's just a dude, and he dresses up and he looks like a cute girl. And for some reason, like the Twitter trans community fucking hate this guy. And nobody really knows why, but I get like there's a bunch of weird arguments about it, but he's very just non-offensive. He just plays video games and dresses like a girl, and people like fucking hate him for it. So that's kind of like my.
You know exactly what you're talking about.
No, that's why my belief of like, it wouldn't have mattered who I was associated with. It wouldn't have mattered if I was like the most diverse person in the world, or if I was the most generic white kid ever, or anything in between. It wouldn't have mattered. It's what I was trying to accomplish was unacceptable, because even like the book shit, nobody really gave a fuck about it besides like Vice and people on Twitter, until I went on Jimmy Dore. That was like the unacceptable thing. Like there was less news coverage of that guy in California killing 2 cops than there was me talking to a leftist.
Yeah, I remember that era. I remember those days, and just the kind of vitriol that people would bring, leftists and left anarchists and stuff would aim at you. I mean, they clearly felt that you were not only a bad person, but a real threat, and a real threat to, I don't know, spreading bad ideas or the wrong ideas about, like, I don't know, anarchism or something like that, or that you were some sort of person that's infiltrating something that you're not infiltrating. You're creating a movement. I mean, you're creating like a march and stuff.
That was the main accusation.
They really hated it.
Like, that was the main accusation from everybody, because obviously, like, it started with like leftists really hating me, but then it expanded to like when I went on Dave Smith, that's when all the libertarians started hating me. When I went on Alex Jones, that's when all the conservatives and Nazis started going after me, and I started like bumping elbows with fucking Patriot Front, who were publicly calling me out by name of not liking me, and I started fucking with them because they're Nazis. They go, but yeah, like that was the main argument of everything, was that I had some agenda, that I was an infiltrator, that I was the Fed. But and like my whole message was like, can we just get along? Can we just stop fighting about dumb shit and care about things that like matter? That was a very basic, simple message, and yeah, it's just unacceptable. And the of all the people you expect to be like the coolest with that, which would be like LP people, they started being cool with it, but then very rapidly like it deteriorated to where like a pretty popular thread of so I forget who it was, but it was like one of the Tower Gang people or something. And they're like, you shouldn't associate with communist infiltrators and leftist infiltrators. And I'm like, do you consider me one of those? And they were like, yeah. And then I got blocked by like most of that crowd, which turned out to be like the majority of the Mises Caucus now. So it's like, wow, okay, yeah, it's that entire idea is unacceptable in any circumstance whatsoever.
Yeah, see, I'm much more down with that nowadays, actually. Like, I'm not looking to go out and protest, but I care less about, like, I've said this a number of times, but I care less about what your pet economic theory or whatever is. I care more about, like, how do you treat other people?
Yeah.
What are you actually fucking doing about it? Like, what are you actually doing in the real world? You know, we can argue theory fucking later. I don't really care about any of that, but like, what are you actually doing? You know, and are you a decent fucking human? Are you not a scumbag? Because I will take like a decent human who I don't agree with on a lot of things versus somebody who agrees with me almost 100% ideologically, who is an asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so
particularly a useless asshole.
Yeah, exactly. A useless asshole who just is mean to people on the internet, and that's what they do with their fucking life, you know? So I don't care. So I mean, I've long considered myself, you know, sort of anarchist without adjectives, but even still further than that, I almost like not an asshole coalition, you know, like
right.
just people who are fucking decent to each other, you know. Can we just
not spooked as Sterner
right.
And I mean, you know firsthand, because like you're you know, we have like a little circle of people that all get together on Twitter, and that circle is a very, very politically fucking diverse circle, and a lot of it is wild. Like 3D. A lot of it's people associated with 3D printed gun Twitter, which is like a whole other thing I've been trying to wrap my head around of why like 3D printed guns is the space that's free of culture war for the most part. But like you have people that are like ANCAPs all the way to like anarcho-communists to like straight like fucking hang landlords from bridges, insurrectionary anarchists and shit like that. And there's like 80 people that are in that little circle, and there's never a fight. And it's and I think you're right. It's just because like nobody's a dickhead. You know, that's
they're just all chill. You know what I mean? Like that's what you really need is just find the chill people that you can and do what you can in your own time. And that's the only thing we can hope for. You know, there is no mass movement. There is no mass unity. It doesn't exist. But we can find like fucking those who we can actually associate with and who are chill and are actually doing shit and are kind and help and are a positive influence in their communities and shit like that.
More than anything, just mind their own damn business. Because like a lot like culture, like the culture war has so many different definitions, and like no, I don't think like just talking about racism or trans issues is culture war issues. But like the fundamental thing that makes something culture war is, are you just going to like a random person with no political power and harassing them for how they live their life in a way that doesn't affect you whatsoever? Or do you mind your business? Because if you mind your business, you're probably not a culture warrior. If you're on Twitter and like a gay person is making a post about like getting married or something like that, and then you jump in the replies to say something fucking stupid, that's a culture warrior. If somebody's playing fucking Harry Potter game and you jump in to call them an evil person for playing a Harry Potter game, that's culture war shit. It's stuff that does not matter at all. It is just, personality policing and hobby policing people with no power and just, crabs in a barrel logic. That's culture war.
Yep.
You can talk about trans issues. You can talk about issues with racism. You can talk about issues with even like stuff like in movies and video games. You can talk about that. But the moment you get down to the level of you're just attacking normal people, that's a culture warrior. And that's the people I vehemently fucking hate on a deep level.
You know what's you brought up Alex Jones a couple of times, and what you're saying right now just kind of like it brought a couple things together in my head. So I started listening to Alex Jones like in the late 90s, and like I was getting Alex Jones on tape. Do you know what I mean? So before that, before he
completely fell off the fucking deep end.
That's where I'm going. And before that, I was listening to Bill Cooper. But when I first came across Jones, I'm like, this guy's a fucking Fed. But then I kind of gave him a chance and whatever else, and he was a different fucking goddamn human being back then. I swear to God, like he was not the same, like super ultra conservative fucking culture warrior. Like, oh my God, the West and the godless commies and whatever the thing. Like that's not where he was at back then. Like
the goblin Hillary Clinton turn in your kids into gay
right, these are all demons, goddamn it. Like turning the frogs gay. Like it was none of that shit. Like he was always kind of a wild dude, right? But it was like kind of talking like you and I now. He's like, there's no hope in politics. Mind your damn business. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Just try to be a positive influence in your own community. That's where our only hope is.
Like, one of my most surreal experiences, and this is kind of like forgotten in the annals of history, but I have so many pictures and videos of it. Was the Chicago Black Site protests, which I see we're getting up on time, so I'll be real quick in summarizing it. But essentially, the Guardian and Glenn Greenwald had uncovered that Chicago Police Department were essentially running like a fucking CIA black site.
Oh, I remember
it was
that.
straight up run by an ex-Guantanamo Bay employee who became a cop. And they were torturing fucking activists and like gangbangers and shit in this place off the books. Just straight up, like this should not be happening in this country at all, let alone to like just hippie kids, protesting, and they're getting chained to pipes and waterboarded and shit. It was awful. So Glenn Greenwald and the Guardian broke it, which is kind of like this weird, sect of the left or whatever. Then Alex Jones picked it up and InfoWars picked it up. And then the local Libertarian Party, all these people separate, decided they wanted to protest it. And then obviously like you had BAM, which was by any means necessary, which was kind of pro-Antifa, a bunch of anarcho-communists and stuff like that. And then this was like just a year or so after, Hands Up, Don't Shoot and all that. So you had like proto-BLM there. And all these groups came together and they had a big event, and everybody talked, and everybody said their piece. And I have a famous picture on my phone that I posted a couple times of an oath keeper standing there talking to a BLM activist in front of an anti-fascist flag at the same protest, and nobody was fighting. Nobody was fighting at all. They were just like, "Hey, this is fucked up, and this shouldn't be a thing, and we're gonna come out and complain about it." And there was no drama at all. And I think about that, and I'm like, that could never happen today. Never. Oh my God, it would be a riot.
Have you ever
a more distinct group of people who at the time, like this was before like Antifa and BLM kind of like more merged into like those anti-fascist groups were kind of treated as like white anarchists that the BLM didn't want to associate with. So this was 4 groups that did not really fuck with each other at all. They all kind of like didn't like each other. Libertarians didn't really like Alex Jones. Alex Jones didn't really like the Glenn Greenwald types. All these groups didn't like each other, really. And if you got them on social media, they'd probably fight. But they all got together and they had this really great event that raised like enough local awareness to get this place shut down at the time, because it was a pretty big event, and it's something that could never happen again.
No, everything's just changed, and all of these people are on board with the culture shit now. You know what I mean? So I don't know if Jones is just a long op or what. You know what I mean? But
who even knows?
He changed. I think it comes down to like clicks again, right? Like just like him or Tim Pool or Pete Quiznos or whatever the thing. They stick their finger in the air and they know where the wind's blowing. You know what I mean? They just know what people are what's going to get eyeballs.
It's clicks, clout, and obviously access politics too. I get to talk to like these big people now that I have these certain politics. I can get in more, and I can move about more freely, because like I talk about, my politics can get me on Tim Pool, but a culture warrior can get on Tim Pool in front of a million people. So.
Yep. Hey, have you ever heard of Ben Stone?
I have not.
So back to the sort of libertarians and ANCAPs like not really doing things. Ben Stone's a Quaker, sort of Christian anarchist. He's an ANCAP.
Was he? Did he write the book about like fucking insurrectionary like uprising and shit? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Yes.
Quaker. Okay, yes, I do know this guy. I don't know much about him, but I know his famous quote about cops.
Yeah. He's pretty awesome. I used to listen to his podcast back in the day, and he wrote the book Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage.
Yeah.
And so you want to talk about this is like the ANCAP version of like Blessed is the Flame or Armed Joy.
Mhm.
It's a legit, like, there's a lot of like natural laws, natural rights stuff in it, and it's a little spooky in that regard.
But it's all praxis, little theory.
Yes, for real. And it's like, it's kind of like, you ever read what's that book by Spooner where it's a plan for the abolition of slavery, where he's like,
Yes.
basically he gives you a practical argument and then also gives you the moral argument why it's a moral good to shoot slave owners in their fucking faces.
Yep.
And it's kind of the same thing. So he'll give you like a moral argument why this is all justified, and then blah blah blah, and then like it's a legit book. I would think you would.
Yeah, I've always
fucking
wanted to read it just because I've seen quotes out of it, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, no, it's a legit like an plan for an insurrection. Like there's like political assassination and sabotage and fucking blackmail and all kinds of like covert ops and whatever else. It's a good fucking book. Point being, though, didn't get very far in ANCAP circles. People are like, this dude's fucking nuts. You can't be doing this stuff, blah, blah, blah. It was with the exception of a select few in those crowds, it was not received well. And then a lot of sort of more radical anarchist or sort of insurrectionary anarchists wouldn't touch it because the dude's an ANCAP.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't. I thought it was the fucking one of the greatest books on praxis of our time. And I mean, in recent history anyway. And it got nowhere in like sort of LP ANCAP circles because they don't, like you said, they don't actually want to do anything. They want to, talk about things and theory and whatever else instead of actually.
You're never going to see someone from the Mises Caucus getting like arrested for illegally running like a business or something. That's just not going to happen. These people are all above the board in acceptable politics.
Yeah, that's kind of where I saw Bitcoin going too. It's like a lot of the crypto bros, they're all worried about how do we sort of integrate this into like the banking system and shit. And how do I, turn my IRA into crypto or whatever the thing.
That's what tuned me off of that and became like a certified like crypto fucking hater, was that entire spree of people. And obviously you even have it in like 3D printing, where thankfully it's very aggressively opposed by most of the people, and most of the big names are against it. But there's this constant little creep of like, well, guys, we should just, stay within the law, and, we shouldn't be 3D printing Glock switches, and like, you shouldn't be like bragging about full auto. Like we don't want the government to crack down on our hobby. And it's like, no, that the shit infects everything, that pick me behavior. It's like, no, stay away.
Yeah. You see that in the crypto space. You see that with sort of even like, sort of like libertarian politics too, like, oh well, we gotta like be respectable and do this thing, and we can't have vermin supreme because we need to be taken seriously and blah 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 and whatever the thing.
Yeah, we need a block of wood.
Yeah, we need to talk about policy wonks and whatever the fucking thing and whatever.
Yeah, all the DC libertarian fucking people that maybe there's a libertarian argument for COVID lockdown. Like, fuck off.
Yeah,
what I've been seeing during the whole kind of Ukraine, and I'm just using this as kind of a time reference, but during the whole entirety of the Ukraine conflict, you started seeing, we were always talking about, what if the libertarians went to the left, or what if the people, embrace classical liberalism. There was some kind of, pushback to I think the conservative, paleo-conservative libertarian fusionism, the right-wing libertarianism and whatnot.
The hoppatoids.
The what?
The hoppatoids, the people who call themselves Hoppian, but then Hop calls them stupid because he doesn't take it as far as they do.
Yeah, I need to read Hoppa for that, partially for that entire reason. But yeah, the new pushback to that is not really like C4SS class radical liberals, or like certain kind of emergent things that we kind of start seeing. So you started seeing these figures come up that are really, I mean, I hate to say it, I've always thought this was back when I had a much lower opinion of like the right-wing libertarians, because I think there's a good intellectual thing going on there among the more, like I said, intellectual, less populist types. Man, these new counter Mises Caucus libertarians are all about the what the right wing libertarians would call the regime. Oh, they're all about this is why it's right to support Ukraine, and NATO is so great, and it's a defensive pact, just like aligned with the NAP. And of course, not even in our capital.
Oh yeah, the case for NATO being a that was fascinating, and that's
and you're going to see that with other issues too. If they were around during COVID, they were around during whichever issues. But I'm so dismayed to see that it's like they're justifying the whole argument that from like the Mises crowd that was always saying, if you're not with us, you're a regime libertarian. That the more liberal or left-leaning libertarians, which I have all over the place views, but like the non explicitly hard right libertarians are regime libertarians, are more moderate or less radical, and that's exactly I don't want to make any accusations of why this is. I don't know. I have no idea, but it sure does seem like they're fitting that bill entirely, and I think know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's been my struggle, and that's why I kind of don't ever really even acknowledge the LP anymore. Is I've always been like, I don't know about the Mises bros are kind of, they don't gel with me a lot, and like there's a lot of like rightoid shit and even far right shit going on there, but dang, do their haters are so embarrassing, and their like biggest oppositions are so awful that it makes them look good. And I think that's half the reason they even got elected is the people opposing them were. It was the Tsar versus the Bolsheviks, where the Tsar was just so bad. The Bolsheviks looked better, kind of situation.
Years of centrism and milk toastery, and then the only people that are coming as an insurgent group, so to speak, to kind of try to steer the LP and thus like in the popular mind the libertarian quote unquote movement in the right direction, which it certainly needed a course correction as far as its image in the public and the message that people think when they think of libertarian, if they're even remotely informed. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Those the whole kind of just centrist vanilla kind of argument. Not that I love pragmatism, all great. If you want to do that, be my guest. But the whole idea that like somebody was going to have to kind of right that ship and have some sort of radicalism, and there is quite a bit of radicalism there, but some sort of radicalism, relatively speaking, in the libertarian movement actually getting press. And by God, like their opponents are just. They don't sit right with me. They're not another set of radicals. Let's just say that. And so they kind of just boost their argument of their whole raison d'etre, the whole reason that they're doing what they're doing. It's like they're playing right into the hands. And I don't even know what to speak. Are left-leaning libertarians really going to be more friendly to the regime? I don't know what the dynamic is there. I can kind of posit a few things, but like, damn, that whole sector is a mess.
Yeah, it's definitely like I compare a lot of these people, especially seeming right now, the libertarian space is totally dominated by political influencers and streamers. That's like the main driving force on everything. And I compare them very similar to BreadTube, where like I believe BreadTube, its whole existence is to take leftist radicalism and funnel it through and repackage it to a way to where they end up agreeing with whatever the current Democrat or liberal agenda is. That's just what all BreadTubers seem to do, even if they call themselves anarchists or communists or whatever they call themselves. It ends up being like support Joe Biden. And then you have like the classical liberal caucus and all those people that we were just talking about, the opposing to people, and that's just like, can we repackage libertarianism into generic liberalism? And then you have all of like the big Mises Caucus people and the takeover people, and with some exceptions. Like I still love Scott Harden. I still think Scott Harden's fucking great. Woo! But like there's a lot of people in those podcast space where now it's like they're talking about how much they love Ron DeSantis or fucking the Kennedy dude. And it's like, wow, you really are just like taking all this energy and repackaging it into liberalism. It just all seems like it's just a big filter to funnel everyone back into the status quo. It's like, oh God.
So listen, I think that God damn it. I don't want to be the everything's an op guy, but everything's a fucking op. Okay.
It feels like that sometimes.
Oh my God. So like, listen, like the whole, okay, so the intelligence communities have been taking, one thing that they do is they try to cause disruption within radical movements and infighting and blah, blah, blah. the other thing that they do, and this is why Rothbard called the progressive era a right-wing plot, because what it did, and there's a lot of intelligence communities and bankers and financial elites behind this, they took a lot of radical politics who wanted to literally burn fucking factories and banks down. And they sort of like repackaged it and funneled it into very basic, respectable, centrist liberal politics. Right.
I mean, look at MLK. MLK is kind of the touchstone for that.
Yes, bingo.
The famous thing of like MLK coming, coming to these Southern Republicans and being like, you can have me, the guy that's a Christian, I got a family, I'm wearing a nice suit.
Or the people shooting cops in the South.
Yeah, the black people out front, they're throwing rocks through your fucking police cruisers and shooting cops. Which one are you going to take?
Right. Right. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing that same thing play out over and over again. I really fucking do. And I agree with you. It's probably not all an op. There's probably some like actual real people like that, that generally believe these things. But I think some of it gets pushed. So it takes all the wind out of the sails of radical politics and sort of stuffs it back into the machine, into respectable centrist mainstream politics again. It all just gets wrapped back into it.
I don't give Dave Smith credit for a lot of things, but I will give him credit for this quote of like it's fucked up because the current mainstream acceptable politics is insane radicalism compared to if you stop and think about it, just like violent, bloody status, mass police,
piles of bodies. Yes,
it's horrifying radicalism. Right. So it's like, oh no. Because they'll be like, hey, you want to stop the war and you don't like the FBI and you want to do anything, and then you come out of like 100 hours of libertarian podcast bros, and you're like, maybe Ron DeSantis is right with the riot bill, making it a felony if you're even at a protest and violence happens. Maybe he's onto something. We got to stop them commies. And it's like, oh god, there's an awful like filter or screen that you pass through that turned you away from a radical in our sense to like an extremist centrist essentially.
Yeah. I think there is something going on there too, where it's like the dissident right, far right, the right wing libertarians, they have this concept of the regime, and you can understand why they have an idea that's really very similar to our idea of the state, and they have their ideological disagreements and whatnot, but they have a full-throated opposition to the regime. So the institutions, the universities, the big business, the different organs of the state, local, state, federal government, whatever, and the media and all that stuff. And I've got to say, like, give them credit. They have a very similar idea, albeit with different politics. That there is a regime out there. There is something greater than. I mean, you see that actually throughout the right, and I think there's a reason for that, and I think it's kind of what Sec and you alluded to, Magnus, is that like what were at times like very radical ideas, and still are in some sense. I mean, if you're going from like and the conservatives do rightly say, like if you're going from 2008, Obama's running saying that marriage is between a man and a woman to like to now you've got the trans culture war politics are what they are, and the position the position on the left is what it is, and then obviously the reactionary position in one or both senses of the word. But because the institutions, so many of these institutions very outwardly, very openly and loudly support a lot of these kind of left-leaning ideas and very, very left-leaning language, very liberal, very, very pro marginalized people and all this stuff. They've really adopted that as sort of pretty much what the dissident right says, a regime ideology. You see right wingers being able to kind of pull up like a very full-throated opposition to the regime because in all of its facets and in size and scope. But someone with genuine like left wing of some sort or liberal politics, classical, radical, so like a radical neoclassical, liberal, whatever politics that generally holds those views, I think it's very hard to form that kind. And there are some people who have done it. If you know where to look, but it's very hard to form those kind of very deep-seated radical politics. It's a full-throated opposition to the state, unless you're, a long-time anarchist.
Yeah, I mean
when you have
the
those
best
positions,
example to back up what you're saying of this the black hole towards centrism from like actual leftist politics is not only do you have all the liberals going back now accusing all of any violence that happened whatsoever during the riots to be right-wing infiltrators, and you have all these leftist anarchists being like, no, dude, I burned down a fucking police station. It was awesome. What do you mean? But then you have like the whole Cop City thing right now where you have all these huge liberal blue checks accusing anyone of protesting this, all the anarchists down there, of being federal agents or secret right-wing operatives. Is because they cannot
Really?
like theoretically understand like actual like leftist praxis. It's only cry on internet, try to get Twitter to deplatform you and try to get a company to change their profile picture to a rainbow flag.
And vote
It's
blue
not
no
that
matter
you're
who.
a Fed or a
Yeah.
right-wing infiltrator.
Well, yeah, the image and the image and the language and a lot of the more benign to material politics is kind of something I've brought up on the podcast. Ideas have been like anything that doesn't really have a cost to the overall power structure and the overall long-term trajectory of the regime and the overall, maybe I should start using that term, of the state or whatever. Anything that doesn't actually take like dollars out of the pockets of people that are in the ruling class. In various constituent circles around like the ruling class, the elites, anything that doesn't actually change the actual status quo of like global relations or the economic arrangements that have like accumulated over time it has been adopted. All that left-wing stuff has been adopted by this regime, and it just pushes people towards it's you don't even want to speak out against it, and it's seated so much to the right that everyone that says no, I won't support this state and this institutions, they're pretty much all. I mean, what's the post left? Not the post left anarchists, but the other post left. What's the whole post left on the dissident right? But just a bunch of lefties that just aren't going to get down with that push, what you call the push towards centrism, and which is really cool because it kind of puts crazy new dynamics on the right because they totally bring a lot of their ideas actually to the right. So you'll see a whole new right from that. But like,
Yeah,
pretty much any journal, any investigative guy, any investigative journalist, anybody that was doing hard-hitting work against the state when a Democrat's in president, they're now a far-right fascist, propagandist forever saying something about the FBI investigating some Republicans under Trump, or ever saying something bad about the Biden crime family and everything. And it's just kind of absolutely ridiculous. So basically it just reifies and just reaffirms this idea that like if you're on the left, you're for the government, more or less, which in some cases that is a lot of the left. It's nationalized this and bureaucratized that, but it's not everything, and it's certainly not every history of the left, and it's not certainly every history of non-right-wing politics, for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely creating this. As I said, you guys said you want to do an hour and a half. We'll see over it, so I'll be brief with this, but it's definitely an idea I want to explore more. There's the post-leftist space that I exist of people that went through all the leftist organizing and everything and came out still left-wing, but kind of not like interested in communism or like mass democracy or any of those other trappings of leftism. You're starting to see, and I see it mostly among like gun bros and 3D printed people, but also kind of like, I'm sure plenty of your viewers, of the creation of sort of a post-right that's similar to that. Of people that like they're pseudo ANCAP, they're not full like fuck property rights or whatever, but they hate cops and they don't they have no problem like watching a target burn to the ground. It's like this very different space of people that's a very unique political. And I know like post-right kind of already exists, but that's more like mold bug people, and it's not even post-right, it's just like fascism, straight up. But like there is like this space of people that seem very hard to categorize, that are vaguely like libertarian or ANCAP or even like mutualist or agorist or whatever, but they're not chained to the nap, and they're not chained to the nap in the way like, you know, a P. Quinones is like, we'll use the state. It's more along the lines of something closer to like egoism or something, but it's still more right than left. It's very interesting. I have no idea what to call it.
It's very aesthetically right. It's very aesthetically right. It's not at all aesthetically or has the trappings of leftism or anything like that. It's, you know, and these are sociological groups, like Gillis says. After all, I mean, these are vague ideas, vague constructs that we somehow kind of often seem to mostly actually fall into. But you're right. It's basically people. I mean, I would say most of our, I don't know most of our audience. I don't know who most of our audience is, but I would say a good portion of our audience, they're not aesthetically left-wing people. I mean, it's just a fact. Like, they're not aesthetically left-wing people, and they may not use the language of the left, but they're certainly not going to fit in with the right unless you're under that position. The right's most of what doesn't fall on the left or whatever. There are some
none of the above.
Yeah, but aesthetically, people that look or talk more like a right winger, but the politics aren't anywhere near conventional right-wing politics, and I think that would be basically a post-right for sure, because it's someone.
Like, I always think of the person I think of in pretty particular is Shadsley. He's a good friend of mine. He's a pretty big gun account. And
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and like you know, like I said, aesthetically, like you assume he's like a libertarian gun bro, and like politically, like he's not down. He's not a communist. He's not down with like a lot of like non-hierarchy anarchy or whatever like that. But then you go, and obviously he still holds libertarian beliefs about like not using the state power, and the state isn't a solution. But then if you ask him like, hey, you know, if a gun company doxed all of their employees to the government, what do you think what you should do? And like an ANCAP or an Agorist, like a libertarian person, will be like, well, you know, like it's fucked up, but we can't do anything. To where like him and his crowd of people will be like, oh, we should go burn down their building, which is like a very leftist thing to say, but they're not. So it's a really weird like group of people that I don't know what the word to call them is, but it's not.
So we got to go into this more. I think we should have you back on, and I want to talk about this space in particular, because I think I sit very comfortably in this sort of space.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like a legalist agorist, like or something like that. It's like well,
I think it's broader than that. I think we're talking about something broader in the culture.
You know?
I think you're talking about something broader in the culture, though. I mean, like I said, like I was saying. So, like, Sec recently asked me when I was saying something.
You got to wrap though. I got to run.
Yeah, we're going.
We're well over.
Let's do another episode then. Yeah, I think that
you want to come back for another one. I also I wanted to talk violence with you as a strategy. So
violence.
Violence.
I mean, this was all more focused about like my political journey or whatever. We can have a straight theory wonk jerk off in the future. I'm down with that.
Well, no, let's do a theory praxis weird posting.
That's what I meant, pretty much. Like,
let's do that next time if you want to come back on.
Of course.
Okay,
this
good
is pretty
deal.
much the only show I'd ever be comfortable going back on. Like, I'm fucking sick.
That's because we're fucking awesome. I don't know what to tell you about that.
Like I said, you guys are friends. It's beyond politics. It's homies.
See, when people say something about people talk shit about podcasters, I don't feel like they're talking about me. I don't get it.
No, for real.
That ain't me.
But I guess unless you guys need anything else, I was honored to be here. It's fun. It's always fun to talk to you guys. It's definitely nice.
Thanks for like hustling. Thanks for hustling and like getting on with us in the car and everything. We appreciate it.
It's just nice. Like I always talk about, it's nice to talk to people when you don't have to define like 100 terms and like events and everything. They kind of just understand what the fuck's going on. It's always nice.
Yeah, for real. Do you want to plug things? I don't think you want people to find you. So
no, I mean, you can put my Twitter bio in there if people are really interested. Though, like, expect a lot of unapologetic post-leftism shit because I'm not afraid to post stuff like that. But I don't have a store. I don't have a YouTube. I don't have a channel. I've quit all of that shit. It's just me treating Twitter like live journal essentially. That's it.
And painting stuff.
Oh yeah, and lot getting back on painting stuff. Real quick, someone accused me that I'm doing that to rebrand myself when I know both of you have seen like stuff from like me painting stuff in like 2015, 2013.
Yeah, forever. Yeah.
Twitter's fucking annoying shit, but yeah.
Well, you're obviously painting stuff because you're some kind of
infiltrating the painting community.
All right, man. This was a blast. Thanks for coming on. I'll get with you and we'll set up another one of these. So that'll be good.
All right, hell yeah, I appreciate it, man. Y'all have a good one.
All right, peace, brother. Later.